again. Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you to the Anderson's Bookshop's virtual event here with, at the moment, 3 of some of our favorite authors, Charlie Donlea, Lisa Black, and Jen J. Danna. Kevin O'Brien is hopefully going to join us in a little bit, working on some tech things there. So in the meantime, we will go ahead and get started without him. My name is Ginny. I'm with Anderson's Bookshops. I'm one of the events coordinators, and we're really glad to have you joining us today.
Kevin's here. He was
there
the
is
Galaxy
Kevin.
Grandmaster.
Oh, Kevin, can we unmute you? See if I can.
I think I'm Zoom. I'm unmuted now.
There you are. We can hear you now. Hi.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm a Zoom spaz.
No worries. I did not recognize the Galaxy Grand Prime name, so.
I was like wondering why it was taking so long to get in.
Yes, sorry. I was not aware of your grand title, so I didn't let you in. Like Grand Poobah, right?
Yes.
That's fantastic. All right. Well, welcome to Kevin as well. Thanks for getting in. I would glad to have you all here and to be doing this virtual event on this lovely Saturday. It's extra special, as you are all hopefully aware, Anderson's is a local independent bookstore. We are actually run and owned by the Anderson family and have been for going on 6 generations now. And we normally, in normal before times, as we're calling them, we do about 400 events like in our stores during a year. And so we're shifting, as everyone is, into this virtual new universe and wanting to make sure everybody can stay connected during these times. And your support at these events is incredibly appreciated by all of us. We've been hit hard, as everyone has. And it's wonderful that we can still have a little bit of interaction this way and still talk books, which are helping us all escape from the madness outside our doors. I do want to mention today is an extra special day, as it is in an independent bookstore day across the country. There's all kinds of things happening online. I'm sure you authors are tweeting and social mediaing about things as we are. So your support today is extra special to us. So we take it very personally. So we say thank you. And to our author friends, we say thank you so much for helping to support us with giving us your time at these events. So I'm going to hand it over to the authors here. You guys can chat. I will do my work in saying that Charlie's new book is Suicide House. Kevin O'Brien's new book is Bad Sister. Lisa's book, Every Kind of Wicked, and Jen's new book, Exit Strategy. I will put links into the chat if for some reason you don't have your copies of those as of yet. You're going to have signed copies of all of them starting next week, and I know you're going to find some great stories here to talk about. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to you fantastic authors.
Thanks, Jenny.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you.
So see, I said thank you, Ginny, and my Siri came on. So we kind of all decided we're gonna just do this as a big discussion here. So I'm gonna do my best to moderate and push certain topics and discussions, and then we can go wherever we want. But let's start just by talking about our new thrillers. And Kevin, let's start with you because you're our most experienced.
That's a nice way of saying oldest. I like that.
All right. You've been doing
You're
it
the
for
old
20 years.
geezer among us. I am the old one who doesn't know how to work Zoom.
Most experienced, Kevin. Most experienced.
I like that, Charlie.
Tell us what's going on with the Bad Sister.
Well, first of all, I need to apologize for the technical problems I'm having, and also that my Zoom is like the worst. Do I look like a cosmonaut from 1959, like talking to you from?
Pretty good, I think.
Hi, I'm on the second orbit of the Earth here.
Yeah. But you got the coolest background.
Yeah.
So
Thank you. This is,
Yeah, I think he wins.
this is a Murphy bed closet that was converted into like a regular like little study. So my computer's back there. There's actually a window right there, and it has a view of the Space Needle. It's perfect.
Nice.
Perfect little study nook. Yeah. So I've had this for the last like 25. I got this apartment with money I got for a movie deal. Jealous much?
Ooh.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's that?
Very jealous.
I hope so. That's why I'm here. But also I'm here to talk about The Bad Sister. The Bad Sister takes place in Chicago. So keep that in mind. Can everybody hear me, by the way?
Yes.
Good. It takes place in North Chicago, like near Lake Forest and Waukegan. I called the place Delmar. So as you mystery writers know, since the police are so stupid in half of our thrillers, we have to sometimes name the area that the book takes place in, give it a fake name so that no one sues us. So it takes place in the fictional town of Delmar. And it's about two Seattle half-sisters who come to college at Our Lady of the Cove in Delmar. It's a small Catholic university, and they are there for the 50th anniversary, unbeknownst to them, of the Immaculate Conception murders. And there's a copycat on the loose, and he's obsessed with one of the sisters. So that's basically the plot. I won't give away too much more, but I had a lot of fun writing it. So, and we'll talk about it later, but I want to give time for everybody else. I will only allow another minute for everybody else. No.
30 seconds. I actually finished it, Kevin. I listened to it. It was awesome. And
thank you.
It's funny that you mentioned, creating a fictional town, because in all thrillers, the police are so dumb they can't figure out these crimes. I get asked that question, what the police have been able to figure out? I said, yeah, but then the book would have been 3 chapters, and
yes. And then you get the people who are like, why don't they call the police? And you're like, well, guess what? Those police scenes are so boring, because all you do is repeat the information that the reader already knows about, So it's like,
right. By the way, Lisa, Every Kind of Wicked, what's going on with your new thriller? You're 6th in the series.
Well, in my book, the police are the ones investigating the crime. It's a police procedural, so I hope they're not stupid. My character's a forensic scientist, because that's what I do for a living. Still, I have the day job. And so the premise of the whole series is that it started out with this idea of what if there's a guy who takes the worst of the city's criminals, the ones who never get convicted because they never leave enough evidence to get into a courtroom in the first place. And he doesn't enjoy killing. He doesn't hate them. He knows they're a product of their environment. So he brings them in and sits them down and plies them with their favorite food and drink and listens to them. And when they're about as relaxed and happy as it's possible for them to get in this world, he puts 3 bullets in the back of their heads. Because this to him is the humane and responsible thing to do. And of course, he doesn't tell anybody about this, but his trail is picked up by a forensic scientist named Maggie Gardner. So then he has a dilemma of what to do. And in Every Kind of Wicked, they're taking on phone scammers. Those phone calls that we all get about, your computer sending out error messages, and this is the IRS, and you owe $7,000, or you're going to be arrested, or the troopers are on their way to your house, the marshals are coming to pick you up, and drives me insane. I mean, most people just have the sense not to answer the phone if they don't recognize a number. No, I have to like talk to them. It's like, sometimes I just like to string them along and frustrate them, because I figure every minute I keep them on the phone, they're not ripping off some little old lady.
That's awesome.
And,
that's great.
And, I've tried to ask them, why do you do this? Are you okay with this? Is your conscience okay with this? Or are you just so desperate for money that this is what you have to do? And I get that. It's not okay, but I get it. And they will never
you record one of those conversations? It'd be fascinating to hear.
Yes.
And then share it.
No, I should. I got to get that recording app on my phone. So anyway, this somehow ties into another murder that takes place, dealing with this like pill pushing physician and the fringes of the opioid crisis, etc. And so that's what the book is about.
Sounds good. We're going to talk more about that because it's your 6th, and we have some questions going later about that. But Jen, exit strategy, tell us about it.
Yes, Exit Strategy is the first book in the NYPD Negotiator series. And it's also police, so hopefully they're not stupid either. So set in the NYPD, obviously. But in hostage negotiation, is sort of a different kind of take on it, because these are people who are part of law enforcement, but in some ways are sort of at loggerheads with other parts of law enforcement. So when you have a hostage situation, you have a hostage negotiator who is sort of the middleman between the hostages, or the hostage taker, sorry, who has the hostages and wants whatever his demands are, and the tactical team, who often thinks that the best thing to do is just to go in quickly and resolve the situation, which often ends up with death. Not a good thing. So I thought this was kind of an interesting concept, the kind of friction that you get even within the law enforcement departments because of, you know, the positions that they're all in. So in Exit Strategy, Gemma Capello is a hostage negotiator. The hostage negotiation team in the NYPD is actually, the hostage negotiation department. It is the busiest department in the NYPD. They handle more cases than all of the other departments. And they do it as 4-person teams. And so you go in and then you try to remotely contact the hostage taker. The golden rule in hostage negotiation is you don't want to get into the same room as a hostage taker, because any hostage negotiators who've lost their lives have been doing it face to face. So you try not to do that. That's the biggest thing. So in this case, in Exit Strategy, a hostage taker goes into New York City Hall and takes hostages inside of New York City Hall. And at the beginning, they're not sure if the mayor's involved or some of the staff are involved. They have to figure out who the hostage taker is. And then in the end, the hostage taker requests something pretty significant of Gemma. And she sort of has to put her own life and her career on the line to solve this whole scenario.
And find out an exit strategy, I'm assuming.
Exactly. You got it.
My turn really quickly. I'll just give you the 30-second spiel on The Suicide House. This is my 5th novel. The Suicide House tells the story of Westmont Preparatory High School, which is a private boarding school in Peppermill, Indiana, which sits on the banks of Lake Michigan. And during the summer of 2019, there was a double murder on campus at an abandoned boarding house that's on the edge of campus. 2 students were killed, and the crime was solved. A teacher was convicted of the crime, but a year later, there's a lot of speculation and rumor as to what was really going on in the boarding house. And the biggest rumor is that the students were playing this urban legend game called The Man in the Mirror. And over the course of the year, what is fueling the speculation that there's more to the story than what the police found is that there's been the students who survived that night are going back to that boarding house one by one and killing themselves. And so this becomes so rapidly popular within the true crime sort of community about what's really going on at Westmont Prep, that the Westmont Prep Slaughters becomes the focus of a hit podcast called The Suicide House. And the podcaster promises not only to retell the story about the Westmont Prep murders, but to sort of get to the bottom of what was going on with these kids and what they were, and the students and what they were playing, the game they were playing. And in order to do this, the podcaster hires my protagonist, who's Rory Moore, a cold case specialist, and Dr. Lane Phillips, who's a retired FBI profiler, to consult on the podcast. And once they arrive in Peppermill to reinvestigate this murder, all hell breaks loose. So that's The Suicide House. And anyways, that gives you kind of a gist of the 4 thrillers that we have out this year. And so what I want to do now is I want to talk, well, I get a lot of questions, and I know you guys probably do too, about just about our own personal sort of journey to publication. So each of us have written at least a few books here. So I kind of want to know from everybody, Jen, we can start with you on this one. What was your road to publication? How did you break into the industry? Did you do it on your first try with your first manuscript, or did you have some rejections along the line?
No, I did actually get in with my first manuscript that I actually...
Of course you did. Of course.
Okay, hold
We
on.
hate you, Jen. We hate you.
Novels that will not see the light of day. So I actually used to write as a teenager, and then, you know, went to high school, went to university, got married, had a career. I stopped writing for about 25 years. And then after I'd been in my day job, I'm a lab manager in an academic sort of setting, in a university setting. I got kind of bored. It had been a while since I'd been in this job for a while, and you get a little bit stale. So I picked up writing again, and wrote. I met my partner online. This Exit Strategy is my first solo novel, but we have written about 10 novels together, Anne Vanderland and myself. I met her online, and we started this partnership. And just for fun, just for us, we wrote about 5 novels. And then somebody said to us, why aren't you doing this professionally? And we kind of looked at each other and went, why aren't we doing this professionally? So we wrote Dead Without a Stone to Tell It, and that one sold. And that series, the Evan Lowell Forensic Mysteries, has 5 books in it. And then we moved to Kensington under the joint pseudonym of Sarah Driscoll to do the FBI Canines, and now I'm starting the NYPD Negotiators on my own. So sorry. If I tried to sell any of the 5 novels, they would have bombed.
You put yourself in a position to be rejected. Lisa, what's your story? Did you have rejection along the way?
Yeah. Yeah, I also started writing in high school and through college, and it just for fun. I mean, it never entered my mind that I'd write for a living, and I still don't. Yeah, I have to have a day job. So, and they just got longer and longer. And then I graduated with a degree in political science. So I had no marketable skills whatsoever except typing. So I became a secretary for 10 years. So I was sitting in front of a word processor all day. So I thought, well, what the heck? I'll write a novel. How hard can it be? So I wrote 6. All of which are up in the attic and shall forever remain there. And then, decided, well, this isn't, and I tried to sell them. I tried to send them to agents and publishers and everything. And then I decided that was boring, so being a secretary. So I went back to school for a degree in biology, got into forensic science, didn't write at all while I was working at the coroner's office for about 5 blissful years in Cleveland. And then my husband dragged us to Florida because he didn't like Cleveland weather. So suddenly I had no job, no friends, no family. But in the meantime, a little show called CSI had premiered, and everyone was hoping I would be the next Patricia Cornwell, which I wasn't, to everyone's disappointment. And so it was my 9th full-length novel, was the first one that got published.
Oh my God.
That's pretty good perseverance. That's pretty good. Kevin?
Oh, well, geez, let's go back in history. When I was a kid, I loved like Alfred Hitchcock Presents and The Twilight Zone and Thriller and One Step Beyond and all these scary shows, and I like scaring myself to death. And I was fascinated, especially with Alfred Hitchcock and Psycho, because my oldest sister was afraid to take a shower in the house if no one else was there. There had to be someone else in the house so she could take a shower. So I just was dying to see this movie Psycho. And back in my day, you couldn't, of course, rent it or anything else. You had to wait for it to come on TV before you could see it. So I had to wait till I was like 13 or 14 before Psycho came on TV, and I was just enthralled and just Hitchcock obsessed. And I would write these short stories for classes. One of them when I was in 6th grade was called A Knack for the Neck. And it was about a serial killer. And I was in 6th grade. I think the teacher was about to take me to the, school psychologist or something like that. Although I got an A. Actually, I got an A-. She said I misspelled neck the whole time. So it was like, it was neat. And, but, so I showed some promise for some early perverted writing. And when I was in college, I took a creative writing class, and the teacher, her name was Ann Powers. She was great. She didn't teach us anything. She didn't tell us what to write. She just gave us, she said, here's a suggestion, 2 people in a car, they find something, blah, 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 blah. Or you can write whatever you want. So I was writing a screenplay, like a Hitchcock-like screenplay. And so she was very, very nurturing. And she selected just a handful of the students, and she had us come to her house. And we were like serving food at parties with all these literary people. And I was like, and then we would read our short stories to these groups of people. So like agents and authors. She was just
Wow.
fantastic.
Wow.
And when I was at her house, by the way, I saw all her book covers framed, and I was like, ooh, that's cool. So look what I did. These are all my book covers, all 22 of them. And I was really influenced by her. And I remember thanking her for all her nurturing. And she said, well, you know, I said, I'm not that good a writer. And I'm very grateful that you're this helpful. And she said, well, your writing actually reminds me of my friend Robert Bloch. And I was like, Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho? So it was like, it was in the stars. I was going to write thrillers. And I started out with my first book was actually a mainstream novel called Actors. And it was like this, it came out in the day of Jackie Collins, like 1986. We were trying to publish it, and there were sex scenes every 10 pages. I had to do a sex scene, which are really tough to do. Anyway, it took forever to get that book published. I think we got probably about 70 rejections, and eventually it sold in hardcover to St. Martin's Press. And in fact, I had made a goal for myself when I was in college to sell a book by the time I was 30, and we sold Actors on the day after my 30th birthday. So I was really glad that I didn't throw away my typewriter or anything else. So,
That was your first, Kevin?
That
That was
was-
your first manuscript?
that was my, I started one in college, and I had these awful screenplays that I wrote, but that was my first actual novel that I sat down and wrote. I started it out in a creative writing class in Seattle.
Wow.
So I recommend, taking a community college class for anybody who's starting. That's the way to go. Charlie, when did you get started?
Well, mine's the opposite of yours, Kevin. If I've ever taken a creative writing class, I don't remember it.
Oh, wow.
I never did
I
either.
never read.
I didn't either. Kevin,
wish
you
Okay, no one listened to me. Okay, see, you've got 3 successful authors.
Forget about that.
No, I wish I had.
Yeah, it would help. It would help. I never liked to read when I was a kid either. I never read a book in
Oh,
my
I did.
entire academic career. I read Cliff's Notes, and I just got by I just hated reading. I had an aversion for it. It wasn't until I was like 20 years old and I was a junior in college that I read John Grisham's book, The Firm, and I loved that so much that that's the book that made me decide I wanted to write someday. But it was still, I didn't start till after school, and I had no idea what I was doing. I remember when I started to write my first dialogue scene, I had to go and pick up a novel to kind of show myself where the quotation marks went and the period went. Like no idea what I was doing. But I wrote 3 full-length manuscripts that are, just like you said, Jen, trunk books. They're sitting at the foot of my bed, never to see the light of day again. One of them, one of them was rejected by hundreds of agents. The second one landed me an agent, but was rejected by dozens and dozens of editors and publishers. So was the third one. And then finally I wrote Summit Lake, which ended up being my first book with Kensington. And that's how I broke in. So, and I find, don't you guys find most readers sort of hear the super success stories, like Stephanie Meyer had a dream about vampires and she wrote a book and it became, but most people have rejections along the way, and it usually took a couple of manuscripts at least.
Oh yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Stephen King says the first 1,000,000 words are practice. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
I firmly agree.
definitely. Don't you hate it when you talk to those people who are like, oh, I selected my agent and
Yeah.
I decided to shop for an. I'm like, come
And then
on.
it went to auction. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I interviewed the 3 agents that were fighting for my manuscript.
Yes, yes. I hate those people. I kill them in my books.
Okay, let's move on. All of these books, all of our books this year are part of a series. Lisa's, it's her 6th in the series. Jen's actually, it's going to be her 1st in a series. For Kevin and me, it's less of a series and more of sort of a continuation of characters that we developed last year. So let's start. I was going to start with Lisa. because you sort of have, besides Jen with her pseudonym, you sort of have the longest running series that we have here. So what's it like to sit down and write Gardner and Renner novels year after year? Do you know these characters? Are they still evolving for you, or do you think you know everything about them? Or do you sit down and learn new stuff every time you write a new one?
That's a good question. Well, having them in the police department is helpful, I think, because I can just start out every book where they're standing around a dead body, wondering how they got dead. So it's very easy to explain.
The first chapter of every book already written.
Yes. So it's very easy to explain, getting into the story, and they're doing this because it's their job. They have to. So it doesn't require a lot of, leaps of faith to get them into the situation in the first place. And actually the entire series, my last series, I actually had 7 books, the Teresa McLean series. And in that, I kind of like aged her in real time. Every book was like a year later. I mean, it starts out, her daughter's like 15 or something in the first book, and by the last, she's off in college. But in the Gardner and Renner series, all 6 books are in less than a year. They meet in April, and then this last book, it's almost Christmas time. So there hasn't been a lot of time.
To me, that you can come up with so many books for a 6-month time period.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I liked cramming them together to kind of keep them from getting too comfortable with each other and keep them from knowing too much about each other, because that works for the series, I think. So
it's fascinating. Because some of the really longer running series, like I've read only one, like Stephanie Plum mystery by Jan Ivanovich, but I don't know, she has like 30 books. So it's like, how do you can't age the character for the whole time. I wouldn't imagine. You gotta keep her young. So I don't know, how old is Stephanie Plum at the end of the last novel? It's not 70, I don't think.
I don't know. I mean, that's up to the writer, I guess. I mean, didn't with Sue Grafton, didn't she keep Kinsey Mulhone like 29 years old forever or something like that, or 39? Or
she kept her firmly seated in the 80s, that's for sure.
It's your book.
Oh,
so
that's true.
Yeah.
So Jen, tell us what's going on with Exit Strategy. So this is the first, and we hope will be a long-running series. So
three books are contracted so far. Yeah.
So you hope it's more, or who knows?
Yeah.
But how do you start a book? Because like for Kevin and me on these last 2 books, The Bad Sister and The Suicide House, these were not planned series. These are just our editor came and said, let's do a new book with the same character. So when you sit down and you're starting a new series, are there things that you know about your character that's going to happen in book 3, or are you just strictly book by book?
There are sort of round things that I do know sort of on the longer term, but to a certain extent, just because of the way genre writing works, that our books are sort of, it's a very big generalization, tend to be a little bit more plot heavy than characterization heavy. You can sort of dole out those incremental, developments of your character a little at a time, which really sort of helps. So for instance, I'm writing right now the FBI Canines #6, and there certainly is stuff there are character development moments that are happening through it, but they've been very gradual through the whole series. The best part about writing a series, though, is that you're not, for me anyway, and I find I read a lot of series because I like the same aspect, you're not just learning about the main character. Your protagonist is not the only person having development. And so you get connected to the people that she works with, or family members or friends, and then you get to see them develop as well. And to me, that's part of the joy of a series. It's not just the protagonist, but the ensemble aspect, and I tend to write that myself.
Like the family around the fictional.
Yeah, or for the law enforcement group, the people that they work with, or
Cool. So Kevin, you and I are a little bit on the same wavelength with our new thrillers, because when you wrote The Betrayed Wife last year, you had no plans to make this into a second book.
Right.
Our evil editor.
Right. When I started writing it, right. John suggested that it be the first of 2 parts, and I was a little weary of it because I've written 20 standalone thrillers, and I like doing standalones. I think whenever I do autograph signings, and you're sitting there at the table and people are ignoring you, when you finally do get somebody to come up and talk to you, one of the first things they ask is this part of a series? Do I have to read 3 other books? And I'm like, no, you can just read this one book now. And so I kind of like enjoy doing the standalones because I like to wrap up too. And when John, our mutual editor, Charlie, when John suggested I do a thing with at least 2 parts, like a continuation, I resisted a bit, and well, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and have the story wrap up, but leave just a few things dangling. So I kind of went to some masters, and I thought of Silence of the Lambs being the second part of the 2 series, and then The Godfather 2. I was like, okay, I'm gonna just start looking at sequels and reading sequels, so I can get an idea of how to get like a story that's very satisfying, can end on a satisfying note, but leave just enough that the reader will go, I want more. So that's what I did. I took 2 characters from The Betrayed Wife, who were half sisters who don't get along, and moved them from Seattle, and they start school in Chicago, and sort of throw them in the water, see if they float. So, and I had fun. It was interesting, but also such a challenge because there's so much background, all the characters, and you don't want to be spending a lot of time talking about what happened in book 1, and at the same time you don't want to people who haven't read book 1, you don't want them to be completely in the dark. So my hats off to you, both of you, both Lisa and Jen, that you can do series and have continuations, because I had it took me about 20 tries with one scene where I was sort of like, trying to recapsulize the first book and say, oh, that woman, she did this and that, and you're like, oh God, please, the worst. Yes, all that expository dialogue, and so that was a big challenge. And I know, Charlie, you had, I think you had 2 characters from 2 other books from Suicide House. Is that correct, or am I?
Yeah, no. So the main character is Rory Moore, a cold case specialist, and then her partner is Lane Phillips. And so mine was even a little different because when I wrote Some Choose Darkness, which was last year's book, that book ended, and I went back to the computer, with a total fresh, clean slate, thinking of a new character and what I was going to write about. And then that's when John sort of
said, my God,
Rory's back. You got to bring her back. And the book, Some Choose Darkness, did well, and a lot of the readers loved this character. Mm-hmm. And so then I, on a totally new story, I just used the characters from last year's book. So again, it was even what you guys were doing. I think I got off easy because I didn't have to. I never wrote a book with any far-sighted thoughts of what I'm going to carry over to the next year's novel. I just wrote a book. I finished it. I made the character as interesting as I could. And then I feel like I cheated a little bit because once I realized I was going to write another Rory Moore book, I felt like I sort of hit the ground running. I didn't have to create a new character. Obviously, all my secondary characters and the story was new, but I sort of had my character already knew who she was. And Kevin, to your point, the worry of like, are you going to forget something about your character that a reader will for sure point out? Because
of course they grab it.
You don't want to find out if someone reads your book, make a mistake in it, because you'll hear about it. Mm-hmm. But the first thing I did was I went back and I listened to Some Choose Darkness on audio just so I could remember the character.
Yeah, I've done that.
Yeah, me too.
So interesting. So Jen, let's go back to you for just a second, because you have, you touched on it a little bit, but you also write this other series in collaboration with another author. So what's that like? I'm imagining that in my mind as being the biggest argument that I will ever face in my life. Agree on a story, but tell us a little bit about that.
No, I mean, Ann and I are really lucky that we just sort of end up on the same wavelength together, which is a godsend, because otherwise this would not work. Like we've written 5 Abbott and Lowell forensic mysteries together, and we're just starting on the 6th FBI Canine book now. So the way that we do it, though, which sort of makes it a little easier, is Ann has a very lovely, devious brain, which is fantastic. So we do all of the storylining together, and that's where we are right now on the 6th Canine book. We're doing the outlining and all of that kind of stuff. And we use kind of a milestoning method where we sort of hit all the big plot points, but leave some lateral room for, character development and just for taking a left turn, because sometimes things occur to you when you're writing, and sometimes those things are beautiful. So we're doing that right now. Then I do 100% of the writing, 100% of the drafting. We then rip it apart together and build it back up again. And so we do it where we'll just send a chapter and she'll send it back to me, and then we'll do every chapter all the way through, and then we'll start tearing it apart as an entire piece.
So that's interesting, because I was imagining, you're both writing at the same time, and I'm thinking, can you be on the same
How does that work?
There are people who do that, and I mean, you hear about these authors who write with a partner and they write every other chapter, and I have no idea how the voice ends up sounding the same. And so what you end up getting with us is, mostly me, but there's a very heavy overtone of Anne over top of it. And of course, we've created the whole story together. We've created the characters together. So it works. I mean, for us, it works really well. So writing this book on my own, there was a lot of discussions with my husband instead. Because I'm used to bouncing my ideas off someone. And he's my harshest critic, and which is good. I mean, I would rather him find the plot holes than my editor.
For sure. For sure. Okay, Jen, I'm going to stay with you on this next topic. But I get asked this a lot, and I'm actually fascinated when I hear other writers talk about process. Like, when do you write? Where do you write? How long does it take you to write? So, I struggle every year to write, to finish a manuscript every year. Somehow you're doing 2 a year. So tell us about this hectic, crazy schedule you must keep about figuring out how to get 2 books done every year.
It is pretty nuts. It's especially nuts right now because in my day job as a lab manager, I'm working on COVID. So the last 6 months have been absolutely insane. We're running 2 randomized clinical COVID trials nationally.
Oh my God.
It's craziness. Wow. So that's my day job. So there's the pandemic has given me 0 break. In fact, it's probably made my day job worse.
You didn't have a lockdown that you could write during, right?
Well, yeah, so I've been at home. I've been organizing everything that I needed to do outside of the lab. I've been going into the campus for that, but otherwise I've been here the whole time. So I just write all the time, and I keep a schedule. So like, for instance, I have to write a book start to finish in 6 months. So I have a month for planning. I have 3 months for writing. The rest, I have a month to edit and get it into my critique team. It comes back, I re-edit it, I send it to my editor. I gave myself a weekend this time between shot collar, which is NYPD number 1.
I'm somebody revive me. This is too much. Can't handle this.
Crazy. That is
wow.
Deadlines have to be respected. They're pretty much written in blood around here.
Oh.
Kevin and I were talking. We did a little event together the other day, and there's a show called Californication with David Duchovny, and he's this author, and someone asked him, do you like being a writer? And he said, no, it's like having homework every day. And then Kevin and I sort of likened finishing a novel to like being done with finals and the fun things we did when we finally had a moment. But so Kevin, I'll go to you next. You've done it for 2 decades. So give us a little insight into how have you put out a new manuscript every year for 20 years, and which I think a lot of readers believe, oh, you've done so many, it gets easier. Does it ever get easier?
No, it doesn't. In fact, I keep on re-experiencing the same things, and I'm so stupid that I can't remember that, this is exactly what you go through. The first 100 pages are always really, really tough. and, you know,
Mhm.
and I always forget that, but I do fall into, one of the things I do is I start to get a routine established as I get closer and closer to my deadline. And so I will pick some long-running TV series to be my break. And it's like, so I just picked Grey's Anatomy. So I will have Grey's Anatomy breaks while I'm, you know, just like rushing towards my deadline. And I'll be like, okay, you know, it's 1 o'clock in the morning, time for a Grey's Anatomy break, and I'll watch an episode or 3, and then I go back to my writing. And so I do sort of get a routine going, but I'm terrible with deadlines. Although at the same time, they're great motivators. It's where you suddenly get sort of creative. I don't know if you hear those stories about Broadway plays that they do all the revisions on the train between, you know, their out-of-town tryout in New York, and that's where all the, you know, and they live on coffee and cigarettes and stuff. But it's very close to how I experience it. It's very stressful, and the funny thing is, most of my characters in my books are sleep deprived and stressed out and everything else by the end of the book, and I'm like, I think this is actually me, you know? Yeah.
That's funny. So Lisa, you have a ton too. I mean, you're on, this is book 6, but you have the other series. So have you found it's gotten easier, or do you struggle every year also?
No, it doesn't get easier. I don't know why it should, but it doesn't. And you don't feel any more confident. At least I don't. You know, I mean, it's like every day it's like, I can't do this. What on earth made me think I could do this?
And they're going to hate it. They're going to hate it.
Yeah.
They'll hate this one. This is the one that's going to fail me. This is the one that's going to tank. Yeah.
Every year,
Somehow I always think it's fabulous and I love it until I put the last word on the last page, and then I'm instantly, okay, this is terrible. Nobody's ever going to want to read this. And you know, but my process is kind of the same as Jen's. I only do 1 book a year, so instead of a weekend, I give like 3-4 months off where I don't write anything, just handling social media and that kind of thing. You know,
that's a great plan, though.
Yeah, I mean, I'll spend a couple months planning and, you know, getting it all kind of straight in my head, and then I'll come up with some kind of outline. It's not very formal. I would love to like outline every single possible detail, but I cannot yet make myself be that.
Because that's called a first draft, when you're able to, you know, get all the details set. It's like, oh, I'm done with the manuscript.
But then once I start writing, I usually write 1,000 words a day, you know, 7 days a week. Wow. Except for, you're vacations and major holidays. And I keep going until I'm done with the first draft. And then, you know, I might take a couple days off, and then I go back and start on the second. And then I go by time usually instead of word count. So that's my process.
What are writers without self-doubt? You know, I mean, every year, Kevin, just like you, every year, there's a moment where I ask myself, I'll look up at the books on the shelf over there and I'll go, how the hell did you write all those books? How did you figure it out? It's just, you're not smart enough to do this. There's just, you know, somehow I think, to your point, Kevin, deadlines are what do it for you. Somehow you just get into a mode where you have to finish it at a particular time. And the self-doubt eventually leaves you alone, and you find a way to get through that first draft, and you can refine it from there. That's what I always think is, if you can get done with the first draft, you can always make it better.
Yeah, that's definitely the hard part.
Yeah, I find that when I do my first chapter, it takes probably about a month to do the first chapter, and it takes probably about a day to the last chapter. It's like, you know, I'll rewrite when I start, and then, you know, by the time I want to finish, I'm just like, get this thing done, you know, and you know, I'm pretty much of a mess. I always think I'm dying of something when I'm done finishing a book. Not a dramatic bone in my body, but it's like, I think last time I thought I had a hernia. I was like, okay, I'm getting a hernia. I don't know what it is, but I think I'm getting it, you know?
Yeah, it's like you get a stomach pain. It's like, It's an
yes.
ulcer. This is definitely an ulcer.
Yeah, this is an ulcer. This is, and I'm gonna die. I hope my publisher is happy. I hope Kensington is gonna be happy.
It's gonna be a bleeding ulcer, and I'm gonna be hospitalized, and then they'll all know how much stress I'm under.
That's right.
They better appreciate it.
That's right.
I also think, when you get to the end of the manuscript, the first 100 pages, Kevin, you said are the hardest. I think you don't, someone said that the first draft of a manuscript is the author telling him or herself the story, because you don't know the characters that well. By the end of it, you're like, oh, I know she would never have done this. When you go back to read, the first 100 pages, like, oh God, what was she doing?
Mm-hmm.
So you know it better. So yeah, I mean, one time I wrote, when I was writing the end of The Girl Who Was Taken, which is like this, I think is a great dramatic ending. I think I wrote about 5,000 words in a day, which is like never.
Wow.
And it
That's
was
a record.
like pouring out of me because I knew the character. I knew, people ask about writer's block. I think writer's block is when a reader knows what's going to happen later on in the story, but they don't know what's going to happen next.
Yeah,
exactly.
You get stuck on trying to write what's about to happen next, and it's like, just write what happens later. Get through that, and you can connect them. Well, by the time you get to the end of the story, you know the characters better, and it seems to flow a lot easier.
This is when writing series is also a little bit easier. I'm sure, Lisa, you find the same thing, is that we don't have that same character discovery that you do when you're writing a first book. So some of that early chapter sort of angst, for me at least, it's not there, because I'm launching into a story where I already know the people who are involved. And so I can just sort of fall into that and keep going. Lisa, did you find the same thing?
Yeah, it's easier in a lot of ways, but I don't want to say filler, but there's less to do in a series, kind of, because you're not introducing the character. You don't have to give a whole backstory, but you have to give enough so that people who haven't read the previous books, won't be lost, and they'll understand the implications of this and that. But you don't want to repeat the whole character's history for the people who have already read the previous books. So it's a really delicate balance there, I think.
For sure. So I see there's a couple of questions, but I'm going to finish it with two quick topics that I have trouble answering myself, but I love other writers' answers to this. So we'll start with Jen and Lisa, because you guys have had these characters long running. But a popular question I get is, who would I like to play my protagonist in the movie or television version of my book? So, and it kind of gets to the question, do you have somebody in mind when you write it, or is it a wholly new, unique character? Lisa, start with you. Do you have anybody who you'd like to play Gardner and Renner, like a actress?
Yeah, I think Maggie Gardner. I'd like to have Tatiana Maslany. I don't know how to pronounce her last name.
Choice.
The girl from Orphan Black.
Orphan Black.
Yeah, that she played like 7 different characters in that. And the playing Jack, I'm drawing a blank on his name now, but I think Ray Christensen or something is his name. He plays kind of a heavy in movies, but not really. And he's just a tall, you could see him playing Jack Reacher in a way, kind of. Yeah. He's just a tall, kind of blondish, tough looking guy, but not like a killer or something like that. Basically just a fairly ordinary looking guy, which Jack is.
Cool. Jen?
Okay, well, see, here's where my dilemma is. I don't have time to watch anything.
Of course you don't.
Oh my God. I mean, I never write with anyone in particular in mind. They just pull them out of my head. So for me to then try to find somebody to fit into that mold would not really work. Yeah, if my butt's in a chair, I need to be writing, not watching TV.
Love it. Kevin, do you have anybody or in any of your books or in Bad Sister particularly?
Usually I have a heroine who's in her 30s, and there is one in The Bad Sister. She is a teacher, and mid 30s, late 30s, and or a young mother. And so I often think of Cate Blanchett. I'm like, oh, Cate Blanchett would be so great. And one of my writers friends. I'm with a group called the Seattle Seven Writers that we just recently retired, but it's a bunch of writers here in Seattle. And one of them is Maria Semple, and she wrote Where'd You Go, Bernadette? And who played her leading lady? You got it, Kate Blanchett. I was so jealous. I was like, you know, and then I watched Kate Blanchett. She was on Stephen Colbert, and she's like, oh, my friend Maria Semple's out in the audience. And I'm like, I'm so jealous. Oh, my God. And I had the same thing happen with another friend, Garth Stein. When I wrote Only Son, one of my first novels, I pictured Kevin Costner as the lead. This is way back when, this is like in the 90s when Kevin Costner was like really young and hot. And no one thought of him when the book came out. And there was a movie deal with Tom Hanks for a while, but it never came to pass. So, but it was, Tom Hanks would have been great. But the finish of this story is my friend Garth Stein did a book called The Art of Racing in the Rain, and who played the voice of the dog? Kevin Costner. So I have my friends, or at least, you know, having these great movie stars play their parts, but I still haven't had a movie deal yet. So I guess I should wish for
all near misses for you, Kevin.
Yes. What about you, Charlie? Have you had anybody in mind when you?
You know, when I wrote Rory Moore, I didn't have anybody in mind. Because I've been asked the question so much, and I sit and stumble, and I can't think of anybody. My wife and I sort of brainstormed who would play Rory Moore, which is, she's this autistic, antisocial, OCD, debilitated sort of cold case specialist. And we settled on Jennifer Lawrence. I mean, I think she.
Oh yeah,
she's the same age. I think
Yeah.
she's played so many different types of characters in her career. So, as a matter of fact, when we get done with this, I'll give Jennifer a call and see.
You know, that reminds me of a story. I was at a book event with Lee Childs, and at one point I said, you know, I could overhear everyone telling him about, I don't think Tom Cruise should be Jack Reacher, and I finally went up to him and I said, are you going to kill the next person who says that to you? He's like, yes, I can't stand this. And like, so you never know who you're going to get. So.
And I heard that, you know, I've only read one Jack Reacher novel, which is The Killing Floor, the first one. But like you said, Lisa, Jack Reacher's like this tall, you know, brawny guy. And they got Tom Hanks, who's, you know, I think he's like 5'10", and I don't think Lee Child necessarily cared that much, because
no, he didn't. He was glad to get Tom Cruise. He even said he was, and he said exactly what you said, Charlie. He said, "Yeah, everybody keeps saying, oh, Jack Reacher is like so tall and big, and you got Tom Cruise." So it's like,
about more than just how they look.
Yeah. Well, it's like Morgan Freeman in The Shawshank Redemption. He was an Irishman in the short story. So you never know what you're gonna get. And God, you can't picture anybody but Morgan Freeman in it now. It's like
no way.
You don't put a redheaded Irishman.
When I listened to Shawshank Redemption, although I can't remember, that's not the title, is it?
It's Rita Hayworth in The Shawshank Redemption.
Rita Hayworth, yeah. And yeah, when I listened to it, every time the narrator spoke and it was read, all I could hear was Morgan Freeman's voice.
Yes.
Anonymous with the character now. So sometimes they do a pretty good job, I guess, in Hollywood with your stories and your ideas. Last question, and then I think we're going to send it off to Ginny. But real quickly, I'm just curious, because all of these are series. Do you guys have a favorite series that you read or that you are reading?
For me, I would say Louise Penny's Three Pine series.
Ellery Queen, which is like really old and not current, but it will always be my favorite.
Favorite's a favorite. Kevin?
I'm not reading any series right now, so I'm just finishing The Suicide House.
Oh, good.
I know. So that's the only thing I have on my mind.
We got to end this immediately to get back to it. I'm reading Greg Horowitz, Orphan X series. I love it. It's assassin turned, developed a heart, and those are real suspenseful and great. So we'll kick it back to Ginny, but I think there's some questions. I'm not sure.
Yeah, for sure. I just threw in the chat, actually, Jen, I'm sure you know that Louise Penny's next book comes out on Tuesday.
Yes.
All the Devils Are Here.
Looking forward to it.
Yes, yes. We do have some special pins and goodies and swag if anybody's interested in ordering a copy from Anderson. So
wow.
we love Louise. She's fantastic. She's been a couple times as well. So yes, we had a couple of questions from the chat. Suzanne Wiggins, who sounds like a super fan, because I think she bought everybody's book. Thank you for that, Suzanne.
Hey, thank you, Suzanne.
Yes. That's always nice to see those emails come through when people focus on us. She would love to know if there was any reason that you chose the particular settings you did for each of your books.
You want me to start?
Yeah, start.
Jump
I
in.
decided, well, most of my settings are in the Seattle area, because I was a railroad inspector for 17 years, and I got to know the whole Pacific Northwest through all my travels. So it was really easy to set things in the Pacific Northwest. I'd know exactly, where things were. But for this book, I wanted to have these two girls from Seattle feel like they're fish out of water. And so I plucked them down in the middle of Chicago in September, like early September, starting school. And so I had just such a great time tweaking all the Chicago things that Seattle people are not aware of, like the cicadas that you can hear like throughout the day, just like, and like getting off the train and like walking into this wall of heat, and just thunderstorms, fireflies. They don't have fireflies here in Seattle. So I just had a great time, and I grew up in Chicago, so that definitely has a big influence, where you live and where you have lived on what I write.
There's a lot of Chicago transplants up in Chicago, in Seattle.
Yes.
I'm finding, yes.
Yes.
I have family there as well, but they're constantly, the other things they don't know about is pizza. So
Yes.
Well, I set my books in Cleveland because that's where I'm from, where I lived my whole life until we moved to Florida. And I didn't want to write about Florida because there's a million series set in Florida, and I had just gotten here, so I didn't feel I knew the area any better than anyone would. And I was, I worked in downtown Cleveland for like 15 years. So I was fairly familiar with that. And Cleveland has a real self-esteem problem. And so I really wanted to share with readers, that Cleveland's a great city. It's got, people are really down to earth, hardworking. It's got a lot of history. It was around the turn of the last century. It was like the most sophisticated city west of New York. So a lot went on there. It's a great place. And I just wanted to bring it to people.
For me, I set NYPD negotiators specifically in New York City because I was looking for a place with a large enough population and a large enough police department and a very busy hostage negotiation department to support a series. So that was sort of, that was a little bit of strategy as far as that goes. I need enough to keep the series going. Also, I've never been to New York City, so it was a great excuse to travel for research.
there you go.
You need some ammunition for 3 books.
Exactly.
So my first 2 books were in North Carolina because they took place in the mountains and small town in the mountains. And I thought for a time all my books were going to take place there. But I got away from North Carolina in my 3rd book, and then everyone kept asking, when are you going to put a book in Chicago, which is where I live and I was born and raised. So I finally made Rory Moore part of the Chicago Police Department. And Suicide House, I created a fictional town called Peppermill, Indiana, because I wanted Rory, who has all of these resources in Chicago, I needed her to be without some of these resources, and it was just her and Lane trying to solve this murder. So we took them just far enough outside of Chicago that she can't get back there to tap into all her resources. So that's how I picked Peppermill, Indiana.
It's a great city name. It's fun. You guys have that power.
Yeah, I like that one.
Make people's names and cities' names. I love it. And then the next question for Suzanne is, what genre do you tend to read? She says, I always wonder if writers read the genres that they write.
I almost exclusively read thrillers and suspense. That's what I when I was trying to sell my first manuscript, I had an agent call me to tell me how bad the manuscript was and that I should stop trying to sell it.
Oh, nice.
Oh my God.
But he gave me advice. He said, you know how to write. You know how to write. You don't know how to write a thriller. And so his advice to me was, go read a bunch of thrillers and read it from the author's perspective, and then sit down to write your thriller from the reader's perspective. And that was probably the best advice I ever got from a guy who a horrible rejection. But consequently, I still do it today. I read other books, but mostly thrillers, and mostly because I'm trying to figure out all these authors that are better than me. How are they doing this? And try to pick up a little bit from every book I read.
Yeah, I read almost exclusively crime fiction, thrillers, and suspense books. But with movies, if you look at my streaming queue right now, it's like all horror. When I want a movie, I want a ghost story. Not zombies, not even vampires, nothing like that. It's got to be a ghost story. And I'm really picky. If it doesn't give me nightmares, it's not scary enough.
Ooh.
Wow. All right.
Wow.
I don't think anybody should look at anybody's streaming history, though, like what's in their queue.
Yeah.
That's just like, it's too intimate. It just,
It's too private.
you could make too many assumptions that are probably really wrong, you know? What about you, Jen and Kevin?
I read, I guess, maybe a little more widely. I grew up on my father's first edition Earl Stanley Gardner, Perry Mason books, and my mother's Agatha
Oh,
Christie.
wow.
So I was sort of reading, you know, in the genre while I was growing up. So I tend to read a little bit more widely now. Like right now, I'm reading The Relentless Moon by Mary Robinette Kowal, which is science
We just did
fiction.
an event with her last month.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, she's also a blast.
Yeah, she's really good. So I read, you know, I read sort of a mixture of things. I do read a lot of mystery. I do read a lot of thrillers, but I also I like nonfiction as well. And I like some sci-fi. So I'm maybe a little bit more of a smattering than others.
And I'm all over the map. I'm right now reading The Suicide House, and before that I was reading The Extraordinary Life of Sam Hell, that was by Robert Dugoni, who's a friend of mine. And so a lot of the stuff I read are from my Seattle 7 group people. So right before him, I read The Lost and Found Bookshop by Susan Wiggs, and so I'm just all over the map. You know, so I'll read nonfiction and fiction. I used to be that I couldn't read while I was editing or writing a lot because I'd either get too intimidated by really good writing or I'd find myself editing a bad writer. I'd be like, oh, look what they did here. You know, it's like this. Oh, here, I shouldn't even point this out, but there's a very popular book that there's lots of head hopping. Do you guys know what I'm talking about with head hopping? It's where, you know, suddenly in the middle of a scene, they switch points of view into somebody else's head. And you're like, what the hell? And I was like, and this book is like a #1 bestseller. I was like, there's head hopping here. I will not take head hopping.
I thought we weren't allowed to do that.
I know. And some of them get away with it.
Bestseller.
What's that? Do you want me to say which one it was?
No.
Okay, we could get sued. I know. I'll never be able to be an Anderson bookstore author again.
Well, there's also...
Yeah, we'll save it for later.
Yeah, there's also a big author who was describing something that when you look at it, only gaming people will get this, but there's a description of a color that is lifted out of a video game.
Wow.
Obviously the author didn't realize what it was from, but there was just some like clear Google searching that just went right in that called out, which, you know, doing your research. But where was the copy editor? I mean, that's what, you know, on that kind of
yes.
Some other reader had to have caught that, should have caught that beforehand. So not all on that, but well, good. I'm curious, actually, if you know, you guys all, and this is, sorry, we're going from a little bit more lighthearted to a little more serious question, but you know, you're writing thrillers, you're writing about crime and police forces, and how do current events, especially this year, shape the things that are in your head about how you write and what you write?
Good question. Someone was asking I'm in like a forum for writers, and someone was writing, you know, are we going to be shaking hands next year? I'm writing a scene, and I said, you know, I'm writing normal life. I'm not going to write
Yes.
to
Yeah, me
what
too.
might happen with COVID next year. And I'll do that specifically, even if COVID stays, because you know the point of my books is escapism, and the last thing I want to do, unless it's you know about a outbreak of a virus, the last thing I want to do is remind people when they're in the middle of my story about things that they're trying to escape from. So I'm specifically, and I never, and this isn't for everybody, but I never really take on a social topic in my books. My books are meant to be read for escapism. If you read them on the beach, that's just a compliment to me.
I'm with you, Charlie. I'm a ditto. Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I intend to pretty much ignore this entire year in any future book. Pretend it never happened.
And that will be true escapism when we read them next year, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
The COVID thing is just way too close to my day job.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Although you could probably write a really interesting one because it'd be all the behind the scenes stuff.
Well, people say, you know, why don't you write a bio thriller? But it would just be like doing the same job day in and day out. So
No
I
escape.
Yeah, there is
I
that.
need a mental break from, you know, all the science.
That's fair. That's certainly
Yeah, I used to get that with the railroads. People would go, "Why don't you do a railroad thriller?" And I'd be like, "Oh God, no!" You know, I just couldn't do it. Too
Well,
much
you know,
work.
some people say that authors and booksellers should, you know, write books about all the stories they have of people and experiences and things. And I think a lot of us that work in retail are just, no, thank you. We do that all day.
Yeah.
That's what my Facebook is for, you know, venting on anonymous customer things. But okay, well, so those were good questions from the chat, and those were out there. Do you guys have anything else you want to kind of wrap up, or last minute last additions here?
Just let everybody know it's Independent Bookstore Day, so support it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And buy
Or your independent bookstore.
books. Buy some books today.
Yeah.
Yes, and Anderson's has got such a great reputation. It's such a thrill to be part of an Anderson's event.
It
You know,
is.
after 22 years, finally, I'm part of an Anderson's event. That's like,
You made
Oh,
it.
Kevin, we met though. Do you remember?
we met at Elliott Bay Books, right?
Yes, we did.
Yes,
I still have
thought
your
so.
card
I
because
thought that
it's
name was familiar.
brightly colored. I think we have a picture of us. I'll have to go find. But yes,
Oh,
Winter
God,
Institute
let's
is great
find
for
it.
those things. Yes.
Because
But,
remember, as soon as we met, I was all over you. I was like, "You're from Anderson's?" It's like, "May I touch the hem of your garment, please?"
Oh my gosh. Yeah, no.
No, you're revered.
Well, Anderson's, those are coattails that I just get to drop the name on, right? And I have very little to do with that. So, well, it's been a pleasure having all of you with us. This has been so much fun.
And very much for hosting.
Yes. Oh, of course. We appreciate your support and your support at Independent Bookstore Day, of course. But your support as authors in contributing to giving us those wonderful stories to fall into and to escape when necessary, which hopefully won't be forever, but is always a good option to have, right? And fantastic writers. And of course, we love your local connections too for Charlie and Kevin as well. Although you're a Seattle transplant, but we'll claim you as a Chicago guy.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Yes. And I hope that when times are back to normal, that hopefully we can see you all in person as well, the visits for your next book. So congratulations to all of you on your new books. Thank you so much for spending time. Everyone who joined us today, thank you very much. There's a link in the chat if you need to add any other books to your collection, if you've been so converted by listening to our authors today. Be happy to get those out to you, and we'll start shipping those signed books out to you early next week. So again, thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Be well out there. Keep writing, keep reading, and we'll see you soon, I hope.
Okay.
Thanks again.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.